Due to the graphic nature of the personal accounts and content discussed in this podcast, listener discretion is advised. Many episodes will include graphic personal accounts and discussions of child sexual assault, domestic violence, physical abuse, rape, sexual situations, and suicide.
Oh my child, I know you're hurt and you can't let go. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Latter-day Survivors. I'm Christina, and I will be hosting this episode today. I'm super excited for our guest today. We have with us Maria McNeeley. Maria is a really fun individual who reached out to me through my personal social media account and invited me to read a blog that she had started about her life experience and some of the trauma and things that she'd experienced. And I took her up on that offer and I dove in and read all of her blog entries, and it's a great read. She's a great writer and I couldn't put it down. So I reached out to her and asked her if she wanted to tell her story here on the podcast, and she's graciously agreed to do that. So we're super excited to have her. Maria is a woman. She is a Black woman who was raised by her adopted white parents, and she was also raised in Mormonism. So she brings us a very unique perspective that way. And then has experienced some trials and some traumas throughout her life that she has been working to heal from and has done an amazing job writing about in her blog. So I'm going to sort of leave it at that, and I'll let Maria tell us whatever else she'd like us to know about her. So welcome to Latter-day Survivors, Maria.
Thank you so much. So I guess I'll start by, my name's Maria McNeeley, and I'm also known as West Side Story Maria. And my blog is blanking on my the name, Dear Colored Child, and that how I talked about my upbringing, being adopted in the Mormon Church, and how my parents were and all that. But I'd like to share that with y'all today. I was born into Mormonism. As soon as my parents, they took a train to Detroit from Utah, Salt Lake City to Detroit, Michigan, where I was adopted through LDS Family Services. And and I was only maybe 6 months when I was adopted, pretty young. And then my parents were married at the Salt Lake Temple. I was sealed in the Ogden Temple. And I also have a brother that was also adopted with me, but he didn't come until a year, maybe less than a year later. We're only 11 months apart. So when my parents got the phone call, they were like, "Oh, she has a brother. Would you guys be interested in adopting her brother?" And they were super ecstatic, and so they adopted both of us. And then I think things were going well. My dad had taken a job at a Seattle hospital. Um, Fred Hutch, I think, is what it was called, and so we moved from Utah to Washington, and I when we were about 5 or 6 is when my parents divorced. Um, I don't really remember a whole lot before all of that. Um, I mean, as a kid, you kind of just like zone out certain situations that your parents are going through until it gets really bad. Um, and so I think my first memory when I noticed it was bad was that there was a cop that came to the house, and my dad was in the shower, and he just acted like he wasn't doing anything wrong. And um, and like the cop was like in the hallway, and I don't really know where my brother was at the time. He was probably in his room, but a lot of the fighting took place in my room, between my dad and my mom. And um, and yeah, I kind of drawn a blank on where to go from there, but um,
That actually sounds really, really scary.
yeah,
To have one of your earliest memories be of like a cop showing up in your house. And then also you said something so pivotal about you said a lot of the fighting between your parents took place in your room. I imagine that that's really scary. And as a child, I think there's a reason why we blank that stuff out, right? Because it's
yeah,
painful, and in order to move on, we don't remember a lot of that stuff. So, yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Um, I guess some characteristics about my mom. Uh, she's, I mean, I love her so much, and we've gone through a lot, but like, I, like now we're good, and like she's actually seeking help for herself, and like um, she wasn't able to get seek help after the divorce and take time for herself. She just because she was going to school, she was finishing up her master's, I think, and she she was just like going from married to she's a single parent with 2 kids, and so there was like a lot of stuff that she's done that, I mean, as a parent myself now, like I couldn't imagine like treating my kids the way she did. And like I guess there's a lot of like narcissist characteristics, um and she kind of doesn't she'll when I say like what happened to me and stuff, like, do you remember this? And she will not remember any of it. So, and that's just really hard because I'm like, dad wasn't the only issue. I mean, yeah, he was a big part of it, but I lived with my mom most of the time. So there was a lot that happened that I just, it could have been better. Um,
yeah.
there was a lot of, there was a lot of times where my mom would like sit on me and my brother and spit and
Wow.
calling us
I'm sorry that
names.
happened.
And yeah,
Yeah.
I'm just,
It's interesting what you said about her not remembering. That's not the first time I've heard that from people that have perpetrated abuse.
yeah,
That
I've
and
heard
it's
that a
so
lot
hard
in
because
your
as
podcast.
yeah, and as the victim, it's unfathomable, right? That this horrible
Yeah.
thing happened and you don't even remember that it happened. And
Mm-hmm.
I know for some people, and I'm certainly not putting words in your mouth, but for some people, it really makes them second guess their own memories because their abuser is saying to them, I never did that. I have no recollection of that. And so then sometimes for victims, it makes them go, well, did I misremember that? Am I just not remembering things? It's so hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like she'll always like remember like what I did. Like she always goes
Mm-hmm.
back to the story of my dad used my brother and I to take things from the house that my dad wanted that my mom had.
Mm-hmm.
So he would pay us to take those things. And then like that's the only story that she'll keep going by. Like, oh, your dad
Yeah.
paid you guys, or I'm like it wasn't just my dad. Like,
Yeah.
um,
Everybody had some responsibility here.
I was like a yeah, yeah, and it's just like I had to be. We had well, not just me, my brother and I. We both had to be perfect. There was always my mom saying, "Oh, I wish my kids were obedient," or um, "I just want my kids to listen," and um, stuff like that. And we were always grounded
Mm-hmm.
um, for the smallest things. And even when we tried really hard to like, if there was something we wanted, we had to do something. Um,
Everything had to be
and
earned.
even when, yeah, yeah, and even when it
Yeah.
was earned, it would get taken. So
Mm-hmm.
there was
Yeah.
just like, why even try?
Right.
Um,
And that's that whole idea of
and
wanting obedient, perfect children. That's very in line with the Mormon paradigm, right?
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, always trying to be good for Jesus and
Mm-hmm.
like he knows your thoughts and I that was like I think the scariest for me is because I had lots of thoughts and
Yep.
I'm like, well, I can't really stop talking to myself, so I'm like, um, don't really
Yeah.
know what to do. I'm pretty much screwed.
Yeah.
Uh,
I remember reading a little bit about that in your blog, and I resonated with that so deeply because I had a lot of the same issue growing up in the church as far as thoughts go. Because I never felt like I had any, there was like absolutely nowhere I could go for privacy, because even if
yeah,
I was in my bedroom by myself with the door closed, God could still hear everything that was going on in my head. And so
yep,
that started this whole process of scrupulosity for me, because the second I would have some thought that would maybe go against, some negative thought, it was this immediate, like, I have to repent for that because God knows I thought it. And it was just this never ending cycle.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
it's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming to
it is. Mm-hmm.
even feel like that. Um,
Yeah.
a lot of the times when I was probably about probably like mid teenager, um, like my mom and I would get into fights, and she'd call the cops every single time, and I'm just like, why? Like, they didn't really do anything when they got there. They were just like, oh,
Yeah.
you guys need counseling. So it
Wow.
was just because I'm louder than my mom is.
Yeah.
I express myself louder. Like like when I'm trying to explain how I'm feeling, she's just like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I don't even want to hear it. I'll wait till you're done talking like that. And then I'll
Yeah.
try to fix how I'm saying it, but that's still not good enough for her to listen. And it's only about her way,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it.
Yeah.
Um, and
That's
it was
pretty
just a lot of
classically
that.
narcissistic, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's just mind blowing that she's actually reading a book about narcissism, and I'm like, does any of this ring a bell, but she's just like, your dad, your dad. I'm just like, this
Yeah.
is awkward because this is about you
Ah,
too. But she doesn't see it like
right.
that. I'm just like,
Yeah.
how? Because I
Yeah.
mean, they both are, but my dad is like he's what they call Disneyland dad. Like he doesn't have any rules. He
Mm-hmm.
just pretends that he's a parent, I guess. Like he,
Mm-hmm.
um, when I we would visit each other a lot. He did have visitation rights after maybe a couple years after the divorce, um, and like when he like it would always be just fun things that we would do, like doing like arts and crafts in front of the counselor when they were like supervised visits, um, and then when he had like we had weekend visitations, he
Mm-hmm.
it would just only be fun things. There wasn't really a whole lot of like learning anything.
Right.
He's more of like a risk taker, kind of like he
Mm.
um, like when we went bike riding with it was me, my brother, and my dad. We all went bike riding, and they were like jumping off cliffs, and I was not comfortable with that. I don't. It wasn't like a really steep cliff. I mean, it kind of was, but
Yeah.
um, they were like, "Come on, Maria, try it," and I really didn't want to, and um, it. I ended up trying it, and I got really hurt. I didn't break
Mm.
anything, thankfully, but
Yeah.
it just felt like every time we do something, I'm always the one that gets hurt.
Wow.
But he doesn't really care.
Yeah. You described your dad as kind of like the Disneyland dad. It was always just fun stuff, not a lot of learning. I was just curious from your perspective, do you think do you think he was that way to sort of make himself out to be the more fun parent, the I think sometimes parents do that. There's like one that's the
Yeah,
disciplinarian and one that's the fun parent because they don't want to be seen as the bad guy. So it's like,
yeah,
oh, if you come with me, then it's just going to be fun and games, and you can stay up late and eat
mhm,
candy and all the things you want to do because then maybe you'll love me better. I don't necessarily know that they think that consciously, but I wonder
yeah,
if there's some unconsciousness
hmm
that goes on about that.
yeah. I think so. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
oh yeah,
Yeah. I hear that a lot from kids of divorced parents that sometimes they'll be like they always want to go to the one parent's house because there are no rules and they can do whatever they want, and they're given a lot of material things sometimes from that parent too, whereas the other parent maybe can't afford to provide those things, and so
yeah,
then they're it just pits the kids against picking sides. Yeah.
yeah. There was definitely a lot of that, and my brother and I are very, very different. Like I like structure, I like rules, but like
Mm-hmm.
I don't like not having freedom, but at least I know I'm safe.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad is not any of those things. So my brother, that's I think around 12, 13 is when we went our different ways. He went with my dad, I stayed with my mom. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I did live with my dad for, I want to say, a little less than a year.
Mm-hmm.
I was still in school, and I wanted to get out because he was also married.
Mm-hmm.
Um, his his wife at the time was just awful.
Mm-hmm.
She was really hard on me. She did not like that I wanted attention from my dad. Like it felt like we were always battling who got attention more.
Yeah.
And Like he used to take me to like country concerts and stuff, and then he completely forgot about me after he got married. So she was the one
Ugh.
that went to the concerts instead of me,
I'm so
and then
sorry. That's hard.
yeah, and she also had 13 kids of her own.
Oh my
So
word.
yeah, so
Oh
the
wow.
house
I
was
was just going
full.
to ask, did the kids live with both your dad
Yeah,
and her?
yes,
Okay, so you
it
were not even, you were also vying for even just like physical space.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was a lot. And like
Wow.
the older kids were not very nice. They kind of kept to themselves or didn't want you around.
Yeah.
Um, and then I mainly hung out with the younger ones. I think they were like a couple years younger than me. Um, and I mean, my brother and I were not really close then either. Like he
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be around the boys, which is understandable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I just felt like I was not connecting to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, and like like, I mean, I was 13. So, like, most 13-year-olds, they're into like boys and stuff. And
Yeah.
at the time, there was MySpace. So I
Oh,
was,
right.
um, yeah.
Yeah.
I sound
Yeah.
old now. So,
No.
uh, but yeah, I was a mess. Um, but I mean, I was with my dad, so I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
have any rules. So I mean, I was
Right.
allowed to do whatever I wanted. I could go wherever I wanted. He didn't care
Mm-hmm.
where I was. So
Well, and I can't even imagine in a house of 13, 14, 15 kids with no rules. I imagine that being
yeah.
chaos.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a lot that nobody saw.
Mm-hmm.
Um like my like his wife kept calling me a slut, whore,
Mm.
all of these things. And I mean right in front of him, and
Oh,
he wouldn't say anything. He didn't even intervene, nothing. He just pretended like
wow.
I'm not a part of this conversation. I don't need to say anything.
Yeah, that's so hard. Like
Yeah.
the one person who's supposed to be in your corner there is just letting this happen. And then I imagine, when you're just a young adolescent, it's hard not to internalize those things as truth when your own parent is not even sticking up for you.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know so then what's the old saying, if you if you call a kid dumb often enough, he's going to believe it.
Right.
So I mean, what does that do to an adolescent developing brain when you have one parent who's calling you these horrible things and then your other parent is not denying it?
Right. Right.
It gets in your head and it goes deep.
Yeah.
I'm curious, during all of this kind of tumultuous turmoil, were you going to church at the time? Were you active in church, and
Yes.
how did that play into things for you?
Yeah. I was. I can't remember what. Are you a beehive at that
I
age?
think Beehive. Well, I don't even know if the names are the same now, but at least
Yeah.
back then, Beehives were 12 and 13, and then
Okay.
14,
Yeah.
15 were My Maids, and then the older girls were the Laurels. At least and I'm old. I'm old enough to be your mom, so I don't know. I don't know how it was when you were in the youth program, but
Yeah. It was those names too.
okay.
So I was still going to church. I mean, church was also miserable. It didn't matter. Like, so my mom and dad live in two different cities in Washington. They're like
Okay.
maybe a half hour apart. Um, uh, my I'm trying to like remember. I mean, I kind of zoned out a lot at church,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, the atmosphere was the same. Like I was still the only black person in both
Mm,
buildings.
yeah.
Um, well, me and my brother,
Mm-hmm.
and I went to girls' camp there at my dad's in my dad's ward,
Mm-hmm.
and um, I mean, I guess I liked it at the time because my dad thinks I love girls' camp. Um,
Mm,
but no, like I hated it. I mean, a whole week with people that you don't know
right.
is a long week.
Yeah, it
And like
is.
talking about God and, trying to become a wife one day and a mother
Hmm.
and like learning all that in girls' camp and the songs and the skits.
I remember.
Yeah,
Same
I'm
thing.
just,
I remember that feeling so uncomfortable about a lot of that stuff.
yeah,
I didn't like. I don't know about you, but like I was like you say, I was a teenager. Like
yeah,
it's so interesting how they're as teenagers at a quote unquote girls camp, there are so many ways that could be made really fun.
yeah,
But then to spend this time talking about being wives and mothers, right?
yeah,
Like we're teenagers and you don't want us
yeah,
to think about sex and you don't want us to think about boys and you don't want us to think about this stuff, but then you're going to make all the lessons about marriage and motherhood.
yeah. Does not
Just
make any
it doesn't
sense.
make a lot of sense. Yeah. It doesn't
No.
that doesn't make sense. And then, and then you have the unique perspective. You said you were the only black person there. Like
Yeah,
that's got to be really hard. I don't know if you want to speak to that or how that
yeah.
if there were any unique challenges around that or how that made you
Oh
feel.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people were like, "Oh, can I touch your hair?" And I'm like, "No, I don't
Oh,
want you to touch my hair."
yeah.
And like at the time, I'm like, I really, I did not like the water because my hair would frizz up
Okay.
into an
Yeah.
afro.
Hmm.
So I'm like, I really don't like that look because I mean, the rest of everyone else doesn't look like that.
Right.
So I'm like, I don't, because my hair was either in braids or straight. So
Hmm. I'm curious, when you said your hair was straight, um I'm assuming you were straightening it. And
mhm,
so my question to you was, were you straightening it because you liked that look, or were you straightening it more to fit in with other people?
to fit in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
It's interesting because even just in the last week, I've been having so many conversations with people about this idea of authenticity in children. Um, that I was just listening to a podcast by Tim Ferriss. He was speaking with Dr. Gabor Mate. I don't know if you know that name. He's a fascinating person who is a renowned expert on trauma and addiction. And in this interview, he was talking about how little children from the very smallest ages, there is this underlying battle that goes on that's called attachment versus authenticity. They're both needs that human beings have. We as humans and as mammals, we're wired to attach with other people because that's how we are taken care of, and it's how we're loved, and it is essential for our survival. Um, but what happens is when little kids receive a message that the way they act, look, behave, whatever it is not in line with the people that they need to be attached to, they learn to shut down their own authenticity and become whatever it is they need to become in order to maintain those attachments, because at a very primal level we have to remain attached, and so we'll sacrifice the authenticity in order to keep the attachment. And so it's interesting to hear your perspective on this, trying to straighten your hair to fit in. Why? Because we are attached creatures and we want to be connected to the people around us, and we'll do whatever
Right.
we have to do to make that happen, including
Mm,
letting go of who we are. And then we get older and then we have to figure out who we are because we suppressed it for so long.
right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like my hair, and I mean, I felt like I was a lot thicker than a lot of people. Like a lot of the kids were like skinnier, and I was just bulky in some areas, my arms, waist,
Mm-hmm.
and it just felt like I needed to eat less in order to kind of fit in or even be looked at. But I mean, it didn't matter. I didn't really. I mean, I've never had a boyfriend that was in the church before.
Okay.
Uh, like the dances, like those were awful. Like I did not
I
get
hated
asked.
them.
Yeah. Um, I no, I no, I was not. I could be on the wall for the whole night, but
So interestingly, I resonate with that also. And I'll share with you, and I think you and I have talked a little bit about this via private message in the past, but just for listeners' sake, and I've told my own story on this podcast, so I'm not going to rehash my entire story, but just kind of bouncing off of what you said, I grew up as a very fair-skinned white person in Hawaii. So I'm not going to say I understand what you went through, because I don't think that's an appropriate thing to say. But on some level, I think I can really empathize with you, because I was often the only white girl in a sea of brown people. And I also was not skinny. A lot of people around me were skinny, and same thing. I was always last to get picked for whatever it was. I was never asked to dance. I was always picked last for, whatever, if they were picking people. I understand why representation matters. I understand what it feels like to feel all alone, and it hurts, and it is lonely, and it goes at a really deep level. And I wish more people would stop and understand what it feels like to be the only person in a sea of other people. Yeah, it's hard. It's so hard.
It's really hard. Yeah, I did have a lot of friends that were actually like a little bigger because they were also like not being picked. So I did hang out with a lot of people that were a little bit bigger, but I mean, they were also going through the same thing. Just from that perspective, being lonely at those dances, because it's always the hot ones, and
the hot ones are the ones that fit the mold, or the ones that were the popular ones, or had the right family names, or whatever it was. Yeah, I wasn't any of those things.
No. like they knew my parents were divorced, I'm black, like just marking off like absolutely not.
Yep, same. All of the stay away boxes.
Yep.
I had them all too.
Yeah. Well,
and it's kind of funny because, of course, now I look back and I'm like, it sucked going through it. It was really painful. I wouldn't go back to that for anything in the world. But now I'm like, I'm so glad I'm not connected to most of those people now, because they're not my people.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, I've had to unfriend a lot of those people.
Yep.
Trying to think where I go from there.
Well, while you're thinking about that, can I ask you another question?
Yeah.
So this interview, of course, is coming on the heels of Disney just having announced with The Little Mermaid that their remake.
Oh, yeah.
I was curious what your reaction to their Ariel was.
I was ecstatic. I mean, I don't know. I really don't know why people are like...
I don't either.
I mean, I've seen comments and I'm like, Ariel is not even like a real thing. Like, she's a mermaid.
Exactly.
Like, why does it matter?
Why does it matter?
So I was like, oh my gosh, she's brown. Like, that's amazing. And people should be like happy for her that she even got the part.
Exactly. I was really excited about it. I thought it was very cool. And then I was watching all of those TikTok videos that went viral of all of the Black children who were reacting.
Yeah, that made me cry.
It made me weep so many times. But again, it's like, I just wish people would watch this. And if you could just see these innocent little girls who just lit up when they finally had a Disney character that looked like them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you're white, it's real easy to say, well, what difference does it make that Cinderella's white? Who cares? Like, why is that a big deal to you? I implore people to watch these little TikTok videos and see. It means the world to people to be represented and to see a representation of themselves in the media, you know?
For sure. Because Princess Tiana, she's my favorite.
Sure, yeah.
Princess and the Frog. And actually, when I was younger, I listened to a lot of Whitney Houston songs.
Oh, yeah.
On tape.
Cassette, right?
Yeah. And then Brandy, she played Cinderella.
Oh, that's right.
It's an old Cinderella, and
yes.
I would watch that movie over and over again.
Yeah,
I'm like, she looks like me.
Exactly.
And then, like,
this is important.
I'm like, I wish we had more. Like, there's like so many books about being a person of color and how to treat people, and I feel like there was definitely not enough of that growing up. And
I would almost say it was like near non-existent.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm so happy for my kids to see all these different kind of books that they can learn about, and like how to treat different people or treat people. And knowing that people are going to be different than you.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yep. I know that in your blog, you talked a little bit about the challenges that surrounded you meeting your future husband. I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we met at the Mormon church, and he was actually a investigator. Is that what you call him? Yeah, I think it was investigator. I thought he was a missionary because he was hanging out with the missionaries, and like he wore that white shirt and the black North Face, so it was like, maybe he's a missionary. And I don't look at I don't really look at missionaries like that, so I'm like, well, let me just put my blinders on. But he ended up not being a missionary. He was just with the missionaries, and because his dad, he is LDS, and his mom is not. So, but his mom at the time lived only a block away from me, and so like later that day, we found my mom got a phone call saying, "Hey, would you mind taking Zach to seminary with you guys, because you guys are like a block away from each other?" And she was like, "Oh yeah." And I searched for him on Facebook, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, he's brown." Like, somebody else.
A brown boy.
Yeah, he's Hawaiian and Filipino, a little mixed with lots of other stuff, but we like clicked instantly. We were like messaging each other back and forth, and eventually, like, we got to know each other a lot within like 2 weeks, and after 2 weeks, we like made it official.
Wow.
The typical like Mormon relationships.
Mormon
they
dating
kind of
experience.
Come on fast. Yeah. Like he wanted to go on a mission. Like he was actually like really trying. He got baptized, I think, after knowing him a week at his dad's ward. And then we were just like getting to know each other, like messaging and going to seminary together. And like we didn't go to the same school. He went to a different school than I, but we were both seniors. Um, and then like my mom actually allowed him to come over. He's like the only boy that I was able to bring over ever because he's
Wow.
Mormon.
Yeah.
I was never allowed to bring anyone over unless they went to church.
Oh boy.
And yeah, that was another thing.
Not
Like
not
I could
like
only
not like are they a good person? Do they treat my
yeah.
daughter respectfully? Like that didn't have anything to do with it. It was about church because the dichotomy, interestingly enough, is that there are a lot of people out there who are not in the church who are super respectful and good
Oh yeah,
people. And then there are people that you're going to let in your house just because they go to church and they are not good people at all.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah. So like where's the priority here?
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, I'm sorry.
so
I didn't mean to
no,
hijack
you're
your
good.
your train of
No,
thought
you're
there.
good because it's true. um, so trying to think where. Well, so we did have there was there were some awkward moments that I mean I don't want to go into much detail because the story is like dramatic but funny on some levels. But like we were sitting on the couch and we were getting all touchy and stuff, and like my mom, my mom came in the room, and she was all like, "What's going on here?" Like, I feel like
Yeah.
any parent would know what was going on, but like
Right.
she just pretended like. I mean, I guess my mom really is naive to like sex and stuff, and
Yeah.
like we never talked about it. Like there was
Yeah.
no conversations about it.
Right.
And so I mean, we weren't doing to that extent, but like we were just like close. And she was all like, "Oh, I think it's time for Zach to go home now." But um, after that, like, I mean, he was still able to come over because he's Mormon, so
Right.
he's
Right. He's automatically good.
but like she did make it hard to like hang out. Like she would go back to the whole you need to earn time with him,
Oh boy.
and like I was like we were barely able to go out on a date because like um she I had to make me earn it
Mm-hmm.
by cleaning something or doing something.
Mm-hmm.
And
Even
it
though as an adolescent, dating people is like developmentally appropriate. Like
yeah, yeah,
this is like developmentally what humans do as adolescents.
yeah, yeah. um So I mean, we were finally able to go out and see the movies, and um, I feel like we spent a lot of time just hanging out after school because my mom was a teacher, so
Mm.
sometimes she wouldn't be home when I get home, so she'd
Mm-hmm.
be, so we would hang out for a couple hours, and then um, sometimes he wouldn't have school, then I would not go to school,
Mm-hmm.
or I would um, get off. I would get off at his stop, which there is some kids from my school that got off at his stop,
Mm.
even though he didn't go to my school. But
Yeah.
I was able to, and it was not hard to find my way home because it was only a block away.
Right.
So when I turned 18 is when I moved out. I like it was getting to the point where like I could not like being a senior. My mom wanted
Mm-hmm.
me to go to BYU, Idaho, or Hawaii or Utah, which honestly, there was no way I was getting there because, um, to back up just a little bit, my mom controlled my education. So for some reason, like I did get help in some classes,
Mm-hmm.
but like that was like in middle school. And maybe elementary school, I did get some help because I was kind of a troubled kid, being with divorced parents, I kind of acted out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So my mom um, was able to, I had an IEP.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you're familiar with those, but
I am, yeah. So,
um,
for people that aren't familiar, an IEP is an individualized education plan that some kids can get if they have certain diagnoses that affect their ability to learn in traditional environments. And so, this is something I don't want to speak for all 50 states. I'm assuming this is a federal issue, though, that all kids have the right to a public education, and as such, if they have specific needs that need to be met, they can get an individualized education plan and kind of have some accommodations put in place to make sure that their learning is more successful.
yeah. So I did have that in elementary school and middle school
Hmm.
and high school. So I was not able to get out of those. I wasn't able to pick my own classes in middle school and high school. Um, at the time, I just, I was at I mean, my mom thinks I was good at a reading level. I mean, I did know how to read, but like the comprehension was just not there. And
Hmm.
I wasn't able to um, grow because I kept getting stuck in the same classes. So if I'm at like the eighth grade level for all that, I
Hmm.
kept being in the eighth grade level.
Okay.
And so I was not taking AP classes. Like I didn't get to graduate towards something more.
Yeah.
So it just felt like, because I mean, not that being in those classes makes you not smart, but that's how you
Right.
feel sometimes. And
Yeah.
like you can tell that you're in the smaller class setting toward
Hmm.
like more that than your friends or
Hmm.
your peers. And um, it was,
Well, also,
I, yeah,
too, if you're if you're being withheld from some of those things like AP classes that you really want to be in, you're also not realizing your full potential, right? I
right.
mean,
Yeah.
you could have had been exposed to so much more. I wanted to clarify it and ask you, when you say you weren't allowed to pick your own classes, do you mean that's a result of being on the IEP, or is it because your mom picked your classes for you?
My mom picked them.
Your mom picked them. Okay. Were you not even allowed to pick your own electives?
No.
Oh my gosh, Maria.
Yeah. Like,
Maria, that is, I can't, that's so hard.
yeah.
I mean,
Like,
because high school is, I mean, let's just face it. Well, I shouldn't speak for everybody. I'm going to speak for myself. High school is a nightmare.
it is.
Socially, it was a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Emotionally, it was a nightmare. Physically, I
Yeah.
didn't fit in. I was the wrong color. I was the wrong size. I was all the wrong things. Then I can't even imagine not even being able to have a choice in any of the classes that I took. Like,
Yeah.
you had like no control over anything.
Mm. You know, because my
Wow.
mom's a teacher and she knows better.
Yeah.
So that's why.
Wow.
Her being a teacher was awful. I hated it. Like
I bet.
she treated her students better than me and my
Yeah.
brother. Like I'm like, why can't like you have the same patience for your students for your kids? But she
Yeah.
did not. She like took out everything on us. So
Yeah.
um yeah. So I was not able, I was, there was no way I was, I mean, I had a good GPA. I think it was like a three, somewhere between a 3.2 and a five. I don't know. But
Yeah.
I mean, they were
That
easy
was way
classes.
higher than my GPA. I'll tell you that. Hmm.
um, but yeah, I mean, they were easy classes. So, I mean, I did take I think it's called the SAT and I can't, the ACT.
The ACT. Yeah.
Um, and for BYU Idaho, you had to get a 16. I kept
Hmm.
getting a 13, 14, and a 15. So I'm
Wow.
like, there was no getting there. Like I kept getting close and then like
Hmm.
studying for that was so frustrating because it was math that I have never learned or
Right.
reading that I never learned. And it was just like, I don't like, my mom wanted me to take, like, she paid for me to take these tests over and over again just for me to fail and keep failing.
Oh,
And those tests are like hours long.
yeah, I remember them.
I would just sit there. I'm like, there's no point in doing this because I'm not going to get in. There's no way. And yeah, there was just no getting into those schools, and it was just killing my brain because I'm like, because my mom wanted to send me off, and I didn't want to be sent off to a different state to go to school.
Yeah.
I wanted to stay in Washington because I didn't want to be the only one again in a new place.
Yep.
And yeah, I just didn't want to.
Right.
And it would kept an ongoing battle of trying to tell her, like, can I finally do what I want to do after high school? Like, why does it have to be BYU Idaho?
Yeah.
I mean, she graduated from Rick's College at the time is what it was called, and
right.
I mean, that's where she wanted me to go, but it was not going to happen, and it didn't. So, so when I turned 18, oh, sorry, what were we going to say?
No, I was just going to say, which now is probably a great thing, right?
Yeah, for sure.
My grades were not good enough either, and BYU turned me down flat because my GPA was so bad. And I tell people all the time that one of my greatest happinesses in life now is saying that none of my nursing degrees come from BYU, and I don't have that name on my degrees.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry, you were saying you turned 18 and then.
So after I turned 18, I packed up my stuff and left. Like,
yeah,
I was like, I ain't doing this, because Zach's mom was super welcoming to me. She understood what I was going through with my mom. So she allowed me to live with them, and I lived only a block away from my mom. And the sad thing is we still went to church. Same church as my mom. And when we got there, I think we were it was like summer, I think, when it happened, maybe June, I don't know. But we were dating for a couple months, I think, and my mom had spread some rumors at church saying that we were being intimate before marriage, and like people were all like, Maria, you should know better. And I'm like, what the heck are you talking about? And then like people would not even look at me. I'm just like, what the heck did I do? Like, we're here at church together. Like, that should mean more to people than what the heck we're doing in our spare time.
It should,
which
shouldn't
is
it?
not be their business anyway.
Right.
But so it did occur to me that my mom was like, and someone messaged me about I think it was the Laurel president, actually, at the time. She was like, hey, I mean, your mom is like telling everyone that you and Zach moved in together. Like, what's going on? And I'm like, what the heck? I was just like, well, I really don't see the point in going anymore, because people think we're doing something wrong, which even though we lived together, we weren't doing anything.
Right.
We were still like studying the Bible together and reading together, and just like
sounds like you had a great relationship.
We really did. Like,
yeah.
And, I mean, we're married now and have 3 kids. We're doing just fine. But yeah, it was really hard being singled out like that, and by my mom, who she does not remember doing that.
Of course she doesn't. That's convenient, right?
Yeah. So I'm like, okay, well, somebody did it.
but and here's the thing, though, like it's not anybody's business.
It's not.
What you're doing. Like, no, people just make all these assumptions. Well, if she's living in that house, they must be having sex. Like, that's it. Like, there's
Yeah.
no other explanation for things. A, it's not your business. But B, I feel like I never really understood it or noticed it at the time, but now I really see it. There's a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like spying in the church. Like
Oh,
there's
yeah.
this need for people to know everybody's business and then go report it. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
if I think somebody's doing something that I don't agree with or goes against my personal belief system, not only do I disagree with it, but now I'm going to go talk to church authorities about it.
Oh, yeah.
Just stay out of people's business.
Yeah.
And yeah, like how about we just be happy everybody's here? We're all like worshiping together, you know?
Right.
What's
Yeah.
like it is just mind numbing to me. And I feel like, and this is kind of a little bit of a tangent. I'll stop here in a second, but I feel like in the church that was a lot of what visiting teaching and home teaching was about.
Oh, yeah.
It was
Oh, yeah.
it was this idea of, well, let's bring you this message, but really it was kind of like, hey, go check on these people, see if they're towing the line, and if they're not, come back and report it to us so we can either A, talk to them or do whatever we can do to get them back on track. Like,
Right. Right.
it's just this
for
like
sure.
just like spy program, you know?
Yeah.
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 Kind of. So yeah, after I think that was like, I really don't remember the timeline. I guess it doesn't really matter. But
Yeah.
after that moment, we stopped going, and I mean, my husband really didn't want to be a part of the church then. So, but for some reason, I kept hanging on to it. Like, I mean, that's all I knew.
Yep.
And I didn't even think to question it. So, I mean,
Right.
I did read on my own, I think. And even when, so we didn't get married so we were together in 2012, and then we got married in 2014.
Okay.
So,
Not in the temple, I'm assuming.
no. We had a courthouse wedding because, okay, so I know this is kind of like going all over the place with stories
okay.
and all that, but
Yeah, it's fine. That's totally fine.
I did want to have like this beautiful Princess and the Frog themed wedding, and did not happen. My mom was like, since I'm paying for it, it has to be in the church. I did not want to get married in the church. That's not even close to the temple, because it's not.
Yeah.
But it had to be in the church. And it had to be her way. So I'm like, you know what? We're not going to get married in the church at all. We're going to have a courthouse wedding. If you want to come, you can come. If not, well, that's where we're getting married. And it costs really nothing to do it. So
yeah. Good for you for taking that power back.
Yeah, I was like, then fine, we're not doing a crazy wedding, because we were both working at Target together, and I didn't want the added stress of getting married. So yeah, we did that. There was a lot of pressure to get married. We were from his mom's and her significant other at the time, not anymore, but at the time, it was just kind of rough because we had to pay rent, but it was kind of struggling because I didn't have a job at the time. My husband had a job at the time, and not having a form of, we didn't have a car, so I couldn't like really search for jobs. I had to take a bus.
Yeah.
And it was just, and then so from there we moved into his brother's house, and there was like they were also LDS. I have no idea if they are LDS now, kind of doesn't look like it, but can't really speak on that. But
Right.
at the time, they were very LDS, and they did not like that we were in the same room together. So I'm like, doesn't really matter. We've already done it. So why does it matter if we're in the same room? Like, it's not going to erase what we've already done. But so they were like, well, you guys can get married, or oh yeah, and this was before we got married, sorry. But you guys can get married, or one of you has to live somewhere else. So I decided to go live with my aunt in Utah. So Zach and I had a long distance relationship for about 9 months before we got married. I was in Utah and he was in Washington. So we were still trying to make it work, and we were actually really good. I mean, there was a time where my aunt was feeding things into my head like, oh, you're not married, so you can go date other people. And like, she was like, also, all my dad's side is LDS, all of them. So I did go to a singles ward, and that was also the worst thing I've ever done. It was not great. I was, again, in a very awkward church setting. Like, I was definitely the only one. And I mean, there was sometimes that I did get asked to go on a group date. I didn't do it again. I was like, this is awkward. I don't like it.
Yep.
And so I did do that. I did still stay in contact with Zach. We were still like communicating, and like we did have a plan. We were like gonna. He was like, he still had the same job working at Target and making money, and like he was gonna save up for our first apartment, and then I was going to get my license and my driver's license and get a car. I ended up getting a job with first it was Quiznos, which was the worst. I was only there for like maybe a couple weeks.
Wow.
They did not pay me very well, and like the boss was awful. Like, she had us come in on 4th of July for some meeting that could have been an email.
Wow.
And did not pay us to be a part of that meeting. So
wow.
Yeah, it was awful. And I walked to Quiznos from my aunt's house to wherever Quiznos was in like 100-degree weather. And so my aunt told me to, my aunt was like, you better quit before I come in there. So I'm like, all right, I'll find a different job. But from there, I worked at FedEx Ground Distribution Center in North Salt Lake. I worked, I don't know what you call it, because it's not really nights, but it's like very early in the morning, like 1 a.m. to 7 a.m.
Yeah. Graveyards.
Graveyards. It was awful. Like, they should have fired me multiple times because I fell asleep a lot. I'd wake up and the sun's up and I'm like, ah, shoot.
How long have I been out?
But yeah, it was really hard. But like, they liked me, so like they were like, we're not gonna fire you. We're just gonna take notes, but not fire you.
Right.
But I'm like, okay. So like, I stayed there for like 6 months, I think. And then I did get on with Target during the seasonal time. And so I worked 2 jobs. I worked at FedEx and I worked at Target. So after my shift at FedEx, I would maybe get a couple hours of sleep and then go to work.
Yeah.
I really don't know how I did that, because just staying at home with 3 kids, I'm like, I can't even, I don't have that brain anymore.
It's hard.
Yeah. I was like, this is not it. But, but I was able to, get a car. So, I had a, gold Toyota Corolla. It's a good car. Um, and so uh, I think it was like March when, oh yeah, Zach did come up, I think in January 2014.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and he was there for like a week, I think. And he did propose like when he got off the plane,
Wow.
like in the Salt Lake airport, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So um, he did propose, and we were going through with getting married in April. So my last day of work was like in March. So I was able to transfer my Target job back to Washington.
Oh,
So
good.
yeah, so I was able to keep my job, and we were actually working together. I mean, I think we're in the same, kind of the same department.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we were both working overnight. Um, and I go from there. We did get our apartment, I think, before we got married. I think.
Nice.
But yeah, so we've been together ever since. And I mean, it was just recently that I was like looking up ex Mormon stuff. Like, I just happened to be on TikTok
Mm-hmm.
and saw an ex Mormon thing. I was like, I didn't even know ex Mormon word even existed. But I
Yeah,
think,
Exmo TikTok has changed the face of the ex-Mormon community, I
oh,
think.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Um, that I think it was only, I think in 2020 when I first saw it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I mean, people were like, why didn't you look it up like when you left? I'm like, I thought, you're taught that the Mormon church is the only true church. So, I mean, you
Yep,
believe it.
yep.
So you think there's something wrong with you, not the church.
Well, that's how they keep you in line your whole life,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
If you're having an issue with something, it's always your fault because you're not
Yeah.
praying enough or obedient enough or fill in the blank enough.
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
it's always your fault. So why would you look that up when you left
Yeah.
necessarily, you know?
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
and it's just a lot. Like, and that's kind of what inspired my blog is like everyone is coming out with these stories, and I'm like, I guess my story is relevant and valid
Your
now.
story
Like,
is extremely relevant and extremely valid.
yeah, and I never thought that. Like, I mean, um, and like putting it together, and um, I mean, I hope I've reached out to some people, but I mean, I'm just glad that my story's out there, and
Yeah.
um,
And you
yeah,
wrote it. I
yeah,
feel like you released those blog posts pretty in pretty quick succession. Like you really once you went for it, you really just dove in and
yeah.
got that whole story told. And I would implore listeners to go check it out because it's not that long. There are several blog entries, but like I mean, you could sit and read it in a day. It's not super long, but such good points that you bring up in there. And Maria actually dives into some other things in more detail that you can read about on her blog. But even as somebody as old as I am, as like I said, I'm old enough to be your mom, there were so many parts of it that I resonated with too. And when you say, oh, I hope my stories reached people, I guarantee that it has. And the fact that it's in blog format means that it will continue to reach exactly who it needs to reach. People will find
Mhm.
you as they're supposed to find you for sure. But I thought it was a really well written story. Um, uh, I think it was you did an interview recently with Robert Peoples of Affinis Humanity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that was a fantastic interview, by the way.
Thank you.
People can go to the Affinis Humanity Instagram site and watch that. And I think I had said this in the comments there, but I wanted to say it again here just to have my voice put to it that you had, I believe, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so please correct me if I'm wrong. But at some point in that interview, you had said you want to be a writer.
I
And
do. Mhm.
what I had said in the comments, and I'll say it now, is you are a writer. Like, you're already doing it. And the fact that you put this blog together just shows that you're a writer, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot to say, and you say it very eloquently. And I just would implore you that if that's an avenue that's speaking to you, I think you should run with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
excited. I mean, looking into classes that I can take and
Mm-hmm.
creative writing, where to start. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the works. I mean, it's probably going to be a little bit since my youngest is like a year. So,
Yeah. How
uh,
old are your kids?
six. Oh, she just had a birthday, so she is 7 and 5 and 1.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you're a busy mom. Busy
Hmm.
mom. So your kids have never been raised in Mormonism at all.
No. Oh,
No.
okay. I do have a story.
Oh,
For
sure. Yeah, yeah.
the oldest one.
Okay.
So Zach and I did. Um, so when we had our oldest, we had a lot of pressure with getting her blessed, and
Oh, I think I read about this. Yes. Yes.
yeah, I'm
Yeah.
like, we both really didn't want to,
Mm-hmm.
but we also didn't want to make our parents upset. So I believe she was, yeah, she was, by, I mean, uh, my dad, his dad, uncles,
Mm-hmm.
my grandpa, I'm pretty sure was in the circle.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we do have an Easter picture
Mm-hmm.
uh, at my mom's church. I mean, it blows my mind that we even went back there in the first place, but
Yeah.
we did, I think, during her first year.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, it's amazing, like going back to that, what I was saying earlier about attachment, right?
yeah.
It's amazing the things that we'll do for attachment.
Hmm.
It's in our DNA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but we did break off from it. I can't really remember at what point,
Sure.
but we did. After we got married, we lived in our apartment for like a year, and then I ended up getting pregnant a year
Mm-hmm.
later, and to have a 1 bedroom apartment um, in Washington is pretty expensive. And
Mm-hmm.
so if I'm not working, Zach was working, and he
Mm-hmm.
was working. He had to work 2 jobs, and it was just not working out. So we did end up moving in with my mom, and so I think that's why we ended up going back to church,
Sure.
because my mom was like, "Oh, it would be cool if she could come," and I didn't really see a harm in it, but it was still like, uh, it just felt like I was just showing off what I look like now and how I
Mm-hmm.
am now to people that I grew up with, um, like they were excited to see me, even though they stopped talking to me during that period.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Um,
because now you were fitting the part, right? Because now you're
yeah.
married.
Hmm.
So like it's okay. We
Yeah.
can talk to you again and we can hang out because
Yeah.
you're quote unquote doing it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was why. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess like showing them like I have a family of my own now, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm good. Like I guess it felt good, but I mean, it still felt like I had to keep proving my worth
Mm-hmm.
to be there. So
Mm-hmm.
I think we just gradually stopped going,
Yeah.
and and like moving out of my mom's helped a lot because it felt like a lot of pressure from her to
Yeah.
go to church, and
Absolutely.
um,
Um I don't I just was curious if I could ask you about something. And
yeah.
again, if anything's too personal, just tell me and we don't have to broach that subject. I'm really curious. So you're married, you have this baby now, and it's a girl, correct?
Hmm.
You have all girls, is that correct?
uh, One boy,
One boy. Okay, okay.
the
But
middle
your oldest
child.
is a girl. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay. So you've got this little girl. you're married, you're going back to church, you're sort of making this token effort, right, to please your mom and have these attachments and whatnot. I'm really curious. And by the way, can I ask how old you are now?
I'm 28.
28. Okay. So as a you're in your early 20s, as a young 21-year-old, I'm curious, were you aware of the church's previous stance on um people of color not being able to have the priesthood? Were you aware of that at that time, or was that something that kind of came to you later?
Yeah, that came to me later.
It came to you later. So when you were raised as a child, you didn't know this.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's so interesting to me. And then I'm curious, once you found this out, how did that play into your, or did you find out after you were already out of the church? If you were still in the church, did it change your view on things, or how were you able to process that as a Black woman?
Yeah, like it was kind of an eye opener. Like, oh, that's why like there's hardly any Black people in here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like I feel like they hide a lot of the church's past. Like they're like,
100%.
oh, it's in the past, so
Uh-huh.
it doesn't matter now. But
Right.
it absolutely does matter, because
Yes, it does.
this is why there's not any diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And like the way they treat people that are of color, they're like, oh, are you a visitor? Or I mean,
Right.
But I'm like, I've had to say that multiple times. I'm like, I'm not a visitor. My mom's right over there. And they're like, oh, where?
Yeah.
The right one over there.
Right. Because you
Like,
couldn't possibly, I mean, it's just, yeah.
yeah.
There's so much that goes into it. And I can't, even as a white person, I had to swallow a lot of cognitive dissonance around this. So I can't imagine, as a Black woman, finding out that this is the history of my church, and how that would, how you process that in your psyche. Like, how do you reconcile that when you're raised in this paradigm? I can't imagine how confusing that might have been.
Yeah. And then like reading about that, that some members of the church, they believe that Black people are rebellious, and and that's why we were punished with dark skin, and that's why there's a lot of white families adopting Black kids in Utah. Like you'll see it everywhere.
Yeah.
And like I guess that's their ticket to heaven. But
wow. Like they're saving them. I
Yeah.
put that in air quotes, of course.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
people, they can't see me, but wow.
Yeah.
It's just so hard for me to wrap my head around. And kind of, as I know I've told a little bit about this before, but I was really small when that priesthood ban was turned around. I think I was probably 7 or 8. So I don't remember the actual like time when it happened, but I remember a couple of years later there being buzz about it at church. Now remember, I grew up in Hawaii, right? So very diverse like area. And I, even as a child, there was, in my small immature mind, had to swallow a lot of dissonance around this. I couldn't understand. People were so excited because, oh, now there's not a ban on the priesthood. Everybody can have the priesthood. And even in my little mind, I just kept wondering, but why wasn't it always that way? Like, why hasn't everybody been able to have it all the time? I don't get it. I didn't understand it. And so we're just told to swallow this stuff from the time we're little, because what do they always say? Oh, we don't understand everything, and God's ways are higher than our ways. So, just have faith. And like you said, oh, well, this is in the past now, and now we've had new revelation. And so it just makes everything all better now, and everything's good.
Right.
It's so hard. Yeah.
And I mean, I'm glad we got out before we even had the kids involved with the church, because I would not want them to go through what I did.
Right.
And I mean, they're brown skin too, so
Yeah.
they would definitely feel it. And it's not good.
It's
It's
not
not a
good.
good feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and reading that, like it all, because I actually did ask my mom. I was like, so why did you know like that people were taught like this way to treat colored people? And she was like, no, I mean, they couldn't have their own children, so they decided to adopt, but the race of the kids was not, it didn't matter to them which race they ended up having.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I mean, I believe that. I mean, she is also one that says she doesn't see color. So,
Mm-hmm.
and she said that. I'm like, well, you kind of need to, because
Yeah.
like she never understood why I would feel singled out in like everything, like
Mm-hmm.
church events, home events, family events. Like it just, I just felt really alone. And
Yep.
she never understood. She's like, Maria, you're making a big deal out of nothing.
Right.
You're overreacting. You're being selfish.
Because you can say that when you're the same color as everybody else. You get the
Right.
opportunity to say that. And again, I understand what you're saying 100%. It was the same thing for me. I didn't want to be there because there were sometimes no other white kids. And I felt really like the sore thumb, like I just stuck out. And yeah, that's a lonely, really isolating, lonely place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so just like hearing all these stories I only read a little bit of the CES letter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm, I mean, it makes sense that it just didn't make any sense.
Right.
I mean, I've read the Book of Mormon from front to back, and I mean, I
Same.
mean, yeah, I mean, it did show a lot of like that dark skin was not like the Lamanites or
Uh-huh.
something like that.
Well, I think they even
I
used
don't
the
know.
word loathsome,
Yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. And I
yeah,
could be wrong on that. And, you know, I'm just going to go ahead and say up front, I'm not trying to quote exactly, and I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the word loathsome
it
was
sounds
used
familiar.
to describe people in the Book of Mormon with dark skin. It was always a negative connotation. It was always
Yeah,
because they had sinned or because the Lord was displeased with them. And then the Nephites were told not to associate, don't mix in with them, don't associate with them. Like it's, yeah. I've
yeah,
read the Book of Mormon cover to cover more times than I wish I had,
yeah,
more
same.
times than I care to admit. And every single time I had dissonance around all these things. And I just shoved it down and shoved it down. And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And so now I'm really trying to talk about it, and I'm really trying to pick it apart, and I'm really trying to be vocal about it because we have to.
yeah.
We have to call it out. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Um,
Well, I feel hopeful for you, for your kids, that they're not going to be raised with that mindset, that they're going to have a different upbringing and be valued for who they are, you know,
yeah,
exactly the way they are.
yeah, yeah. They have a lot of personality, and
Yeah.
then they know they're allowed to show it. So,
Good.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. They're really good kids.
That's awesome.
I really wish that I get jealous of them
You
sometimes.
say that one more time. You really wish what?
I get jealous of them sometimes because they're just so free spirited and
Yeah.
but I
But
mean
what a gift. What a
yeah,
gift to your children that you've given them, that they're not going to have to spend years and years undoing that, what you're going
yeah,
through. But also I want to say, like, good for you and congratulations to you for in the face of everything that you were faced with, that you still chose yourself, that you still, stood up for yourself and said, you know what, this isn't right. Like, I got to get out of here. Like, the self-preservation is big and good for you, because like, I know you said your mom now is maybe getting some counseling or therapy and trying to work on herself. But like, some of us spent so many years in this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm when you say you're jealous of your kids, I'm a little bit jealous of people like you, your age, who got out when you did, because
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
things I was just talking to a friend a couple days ago, and one of the things she expressed, and I really felt it just deep in my soul, was she was like, I'm grieving lost time. I'm
Right.
grieving, like,
Yeah.
what could my life have looked like if
Yeah.
I hadn't been raised in this? What could I have accomplished? Where would I be now had it not been for all of this? And while we can't just sit and look at the past and wallow in the past, we do have to deconstruct it, right?
Yeah.
So we don't
Yeah.
do the same things going forward. And grief is normal, and
Yeah.
grief is okay. We need to feel our grief and work through that. But
For sure.
I just feel so hopeful for your kids. And I say all the time, I'm really hopeful for this next generation of kids coming up, because I feel like they just, as a whole, are what you said. They're free spirited, and they see the world in a very different way than we did. Because I feel like, in a lot of ways, and myself certainly more than you, because I'm older than you, so sheltered. Like, when I was a teenager, we didn't have the internet. We didn't
Right.
have TikTok. We didn't have any of that stuff. We had MTV, and we had people, like,
Yeah.
just whoever was around you. That was it. And so it was very easy for us to get cocooned in these beliefs, because we just didn't have a lot of access to views of the outside world, outside of Mormonism, or outside of our neighborhoods, or outside of whatever bubbles we were living in. And these kids now have access to everything. And one of the things I've said is that I think one of the things the church never counted on was the internet. And now they're having to do a ton of backpedaling, because they can't hide the history. They've tried to for a lot of years. They've whitewashed it, and they've, tried to hide it and pretty it up and whatever. They can't do it anymore, because this next generation is smart. And I've said all the time, like, they do not stand for bullshit. They don't stand for injustice. They don't stand for and they're very vocal about it. And we need that. And I'm super hopeful. So, like, keep raising your kids to be the free spirited people that they are, because I think they're going to change the world. I really do. I'm hopeful that they're going to anyway.
Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. So what are you up to these days? Like, what are you doing now? I mean, obviously you're raising kids. That's probably the vast majority of your energy, is raising kids. And, but do you have hobbies? Do you have anything else you enjoy doing?
Writing. I've been listening to a lot of podcasts. Ears and listening to other people's stories. And
thank you for being a listener.
I think I've listened to all of them.
Wow.
Which is a lot, but or at least most of them. But,
it's helpful to know
really
that you're not alone.
And like another thing that that was like really hard for me was my patriarchal blessing.
Oh yes.
That I finally have been able to like put those thoughts away, but like in my patriarchal blessing, it said that you'll have many sons and daughters. I only have 3, so I'm like, what if I don't want that many? Like that has thought of. I'm like, and I can't remember what else it said. Like I'd be physically fit my whole life, and I mean, I'm definitely not athletic anymore. Like just not.
And that's okay.
And
Well,
Um,
two things about that. Number one is they'll tell you all these things in your patriarchal blessing, but then at the end, or even sprinkled throughout, they always will say, but this is predicated on your faithfulness. So this
yeah,
is how they absolve themselves of making promises to you. They make all these promises, and then at the very end they're like, yeah, but really it's up to you. Like, you have to be faithful or none of this is
yeah,
actually going to happen. But
mhm,
something else you just said, I wanted to hit on, because I feel like I don't even think you know what you said. So you want to be, you are revealing, you're giving us revelation here. It was the
yeah,
simplest thing that you just said, and I think it is the crux of everything you said. What if I don't want that?
yeah,
And that is the crux of all of it, right?
hmm,
Everything in the church, you're told your whole life path. Here's your roadmap for life. These are the things you're going to do. These are the ages that you're going to do them at. These are your goals. Here's what you have to do. What if I don't want that?
right,
What if I don't want it?
hmm,
And you're like, well, it doesn't even match with their thinking, because if you were to say something like that, the answer back would be like, well, why wouldn't you want that? It's the
right,
path to salvation. Like, why on earth would you want something different than
right,
this plan of happiness that we've given you? And so then we just destroy all these dreams of that people have, because they're not allowed to decide or think or feel like they could want anything else. And so they just keep suppressing and suppressing and suppressing and suppressing.
right,
So yeah, what if I don't want many sons and daughters? What if I don't even want to get married? What
right,
if I don't want any children at all? Like, that's a valid life path. But
yeah,
somehow in the church, like, that's not acceptable.
yeah, yeah. Honestly, I don't think my mom wanted kids, but
Yeah. Maybe she felt obligated because
yeah,
that was her
yeah,
Mormon, like, you have to do this if you want
yeah,
to get to heaven.
yeah,
It's abusive. It's
hmm,
abusive that we
very,
teach kids these things. Like,
yeah,
we just keep wanting them to fit in the boxes that we think they should be in, instead of just
hmm,
letting them be the free souls that they are.
yeah,
Yeah. So good for
absolutely.
you. I admire you for your kids are so lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
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 Um,
Is
but
there
yeah,
anything
life is.
else you wanted to add to your story?
I feel like I covered it pretty good. I hope I did.
Yeah.
I know it was kind of all over the place,
No, no, no.
but
It actually was good. And my other co-host Kendra, she says this all the time, and it's so true. There is beauty in rambling, and there's beauty in going back and forth in your story of, like, jumping around, because it's through that jumping around and that rambling that we actually make more connections about
yeah,
things, and somebody will say something, you'll be like, oh, like, I hadn't thought about it like that before, or, oh, I just remembered this memory since we've been talking about this, and it makes you put things together. And
right, for
there's a
sure.
lot of healing that happens that way.
Yeah.
um, I know you said it at the beginning, but I wondered if you would tell people again where they can find you. So your blog and your Instagram handle, and any other way.
Yeah. Um, I'm just gonna pull up my blog so I don't like
Sure.
say
Yeah,
it wrong.
absolutely.
But it's my blog is Dear Color Child. You can find it. You can find the link in my Instagram page. My Instagram name is West Side Story _ Maria Maria, and you'll find that link in my bio. Um,
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah,
and
I encourage everybody, go give Maria a follow. She posts some really really good content, and check out her blog. Like I said, I've read the entire thing, and actually found out that you and I connected a little bit on location too, because some of the places that Maria had talked about in her blog, we figured out we lived like within minutes of each other, I think, in some areas at some
oh
points.
wow, I
Yeah. So,
forgot.
yeah, you mentioned. I think it was when I first asked you about it, was when you mentioned the Jean Juarez salon.
Oh
So for
yeah,
anybody, any
yeah,
Washingtonians will know
yes,
that where that
Federal
is,
Way.
Federal Way. And I actually, when I was first married and first had kids, I lived in Federal Way for about 10 years. So we found out
Oh.
I actually used to go to Jean Noira's salon in my early married days and get my hair cut there because haircuts were cheap there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why we went there.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's what
exactly.
my mom could afford. But
Yep.
yeah, I looked ridiculous because they did not know how to do my hair.
Right.
So,
And that's that's something else you probably had to learn later too, right? It was
yeah.
like, how do I
Oh
do
my,
my own hair, because I didn't have a parent that was able to teach me that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was a struggle for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wasn't really allowed. I don't really know or remember when YouTube was even out,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't think to go on YouTube or
Right.
like I don't know. I
Yeah.
really don't know when that came out, but
Yeah.
um,
Well, now it's
Yeah.
good. We have access to everything now.
Yeah.
I say, like, if you have internet access, I feel like there's nothing you can't learn how to do now on the internet.
oh yeah, yeah,
Or nothing that can't be revealed through Exmo TikTok.
for sure, for sure.
Well, thank you so much for being with us, Maria. Thank you
Thank you.
for your candor, for your vulnerability, for sharing your story, because it's important, and it's important for the people that are listening, because we always say the people that are supposed to hear your story and get something from it are going to do that. But mostly it's important for you, and it's important for you to know that you have a voice. Your voice matters. Your story absolutely matters. And it's through the telling of our stories that we really can dive into healing our own souls. And so we're just, thank you for feeling safe with us and allowing us to share that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on Latter-day Survivors. You can find us on the web at latterdaysurvivors.org. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Latter-day Survivors, and we're on Twitter at LD Survivors. As survivors of trauma and abuse, we wanted to provide a platform for survivors to share their stories. Many survivors of all types of abuse may be able to recognize and relate to the patterns of behavior in the victims, abusers, families, and friends of the stories shared by other survivors on this podcast. Often, as we escape oppressive family, religious, and social constructs to a safer place where we come to see our abuse and all related issues, we are better able to process and begin to heal. We believe that when we share our stories with others, we can also help them to heal. It can take decades for survivors to find the courage to speak about these things. If it is so hard for adults, imagine how difficult it is for a child to speak up. We hope to normalize these discussions so that children can speak to adults earlier. As adults, we must listen and recognize the severity of the abuse, its potential consequences, and the need for action to stop the abuse as early as possible. Just knowing we are not alone, that there are other people who have felt and do feel the same or have endured similar experiences in life, can remind us that we are not alone in this.
Oh my child, I know you're hurt and you can't let go. It's not your fault and you don't deserve all the bad and the hurt. I know you tried so hard. I know you've done your part. It's not fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up. Just hold on tight. It'll be alright. All your life you've tried to be a good man inside. Did everything that you thought you should. Didn't seem to do you any good. fair. You did your time. How much longer will you suffer in this life? But don't give up.